So there is no blame attaching to some who don't wear the mask. And the Daily Express is celebrating. It's not criticizing Brenda, but is celebrating Brenda out and about without any mask. And then there is this other piece about the millions, this ticking time bomb, as 26 million miss general practitioners visits, that is GP visits. So this is continuing the pandemonium. And as we said yesterday and had earlier on previous editions, the virus appearing in the UK has caught the government, or the so-called government machine, unprepared to deliver the services that government owes the people. Safety, security, and that includes the lack of preparedness and readiness by the National Health Service or the medical kind of system that is supposed to be in place. And the Daily Express is peddling the diversionary line, dividing the need for urgency between the COVID-19 infected people needing medicine and care, and the people who are waiting for treatment for cancer and other diseases. The point is that they haven't got the government in place. And so therefore the propaganda sheet, like the Express, making up excuses. Because saying that there are 26 million missing GP visits, it takes the attention away from the mess and the pandemonium over COVID-19 at every stage. Why shouldn't both GP visits and treatment needed for other illnesses other than COVID-19 and the need for care and medical attention and support needed by the patients suffering from or infected by COVID-19, why can't they all be treated as being of equal significance and importance, because each person affected by the COVID-19 or suffering from serious other illness is as urgent as they could ever be able to express the urgency. And it is absolutely of the highest priority to each individual. How long will it take the holders of power in Britain to recognize that? That is what the principle and the value and the purpose for an NHS has been about, but it has not been implemented. Care, medical care and support and treatment at the point of need. And every person who is ill and in need of medical treatment is in urgent need. And that is what the Express is hiding. So that is why it is called the suppress, Daily Suppress. And then it is celebrating Brenda not wearing wearing the mask. Not only on the inside pages 2 and 3, but it's also making it absolutely clear in its editorial so-called comment. It's celebrating Brenda not wearing the mask. And the celebration is on probably page 12. Yes, and it's page 12, third editorial, a very special royal visit. Our 94-year-old queen yesterday made her first visit outside a royal residence in 7 months. When she arrived at Wiltshire's Porton Down National Security Laboratory, her fortitude and stoicism are unmatched, and the sight of the monarch out and about will stiffen the backbone of the nation. Now, if that is the case, if that is the truth, then of course the people in the north have not heard of a stiff backbone that would save them from the virus, because they are inundated with the lockdown being spread across the region and across the nation. And it is still going on page 15, the Daily Express today, in the vein of anti-European, Little Englander kind of narrative. It says Johnson is ready to ditch Brexit talks today as EU delays. Now, it's always the EU. It's never Johnson who is at fault. And there is a piece about the BBC doing a drama about Jimmy Savile. And there are demands for the BBC to drop plans to film a drama about their notorious star, Jimmy Savile. As one of the victims told how she felt she was being abused again. So that is a very thin line of reality creeping into the Daily Express. Otherwise, it is in denial. Just as the BBC is in denial about the crime, serial criminal, Jimmy Savile. And there is a plug on 2 pages for Michael Portillo. Portillo is a Spanish name, but Portillo became a Little Englander of the extreme kind and was denounced evidentially by the former Conservative Prime Minister and supporter of the UK in the European Union, John Major. John Major, apparently unaware that the ITN and probably other news crew microphones were still running on, said of Michael Portillo and Peter Lilly and John Redwood in the early 1990s, that those three were the bastards among the MPs in the Conservative Party at the time, because those three bastards were plotting to destroy the EU and destroy the UK's participation and membership in the European Union. And the ITN News political editor at that time, who was present during John Major's kind of allegedly unaware kind of statement, calling them the bastards, reported this on ITN News, So Michael Branson became part of the footnote of the history of the battle against the conservative reactionaries and racists who objected and still object to the UK being in the European Union, mainly motivated by malice and racism, not anything whatsoever to do with the welfare and well-being of the people in this country. So Michael Portillo is being given the two-page treatment by the Daily Express, which is part of the absolutely Little Englander mentality that Portillo and Redwood and Peter Lilly exhibit. And so when the rest of the papers, we're looking at the rest of the papers, are talking about the Northern Revolt and the North being made a sacrificial lamb by Johnson and his cabal, the Daily Express continues the poisonous treble line of denial and lying to accommodate and give a platform to Boris Johnson and his cabal. Now, we are diagnosing the Fleet Street. This is part A of our world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street papers. Today being Friday, the 16th of October 2020. This is part A. And what this is the third day running, the promotion of the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Barnum, because the Times 2 days ago ran the editorial praising the metro mayors, the metropolitan mayors, that is, of which Greater Manchester Mayor is one. And they said, the Times, in the Mayor Kalpa editorial 2 days ago, that those metro mayors would be kind of celebrated and praised and recognized as the real tribunes of the people when the history books were written. That was 2 days ago. The Times editorial celebrated those metro mayors. We have, of course, since then condemned the Times and the line and the thinness of the evidence on which they made that series of kind of assertions. And especially, we have been condemning them for peddling the elected mayor post, which is completely a corrupt post, and most of the occupants in that post everywhere, wherever that such a post has been foisted, almost every single occupant has been abusing that post and the undefined powers that are given to the mayor. And of course, we are coming from the East End of London, and Tower Hamlets is one of the 3 London boroughs lumbered with elected mayor, executive mayor. One is Tower Hamlets itself, the next one is Newham, and the one to the north is Hackney. The only other London borough to have a mayor foisted on it is Lewisham, to the south of the river from where we are. And there is, of course, the Greater London Assembly and the London mayor at the expense of London, which is incumbent, is called Sadiq Khan. And he has succeeded chronologically, that is, not in terms of achievement, but he has succeeded Boris Johnson, who was in place for 2 terms, these 8 years, from 2008 to 2016. And the first one to hold that post, Ken Livingstone. Now, Livingstone is to blame for the post of mayor at the expense of London, because when Margaret Thatcher scrapped, that is, abolished the Greater London Council, where Ken Livingstone was the fronter after staging the coup against Andrew McIntosh in May 1981. Ken Livingstone became irrelevant to London because that was his kind of patch. As the fronter of the Greater London Council, Ken Livingstone abused the GLC's resources and bribed a lot of the kind of media outlets, especially including some of the ethnicity-linked kind of titles that were created, especially to grab the ethnicity bribe offered by Ken Livingstone in exchange for portraying him as the kind of unique, world exclusive, quite opposite sense from what we are using this phrase for. Ours is factual, evidential, whereas Ken Livingstone's was a fantasy kind of confection about his image. And so Ken Livingstone, when he was made homeless politically, he dedicated himself to creating some sort of argument for re-establishing something like the GLC, the Greater London Council, GLC. So that was 1980s when Margaret Thatcher abolished the GLC. So the 90s, Livingstone mainly spent as an MP from Brent, one of the Brent kind of constituencies. And then, while he was doing that, he was also, without much publicity, lobbying the Labour Party machine to create a kind of similar kind of outfit. And he was able to get that done during the 90s within short time of the Labour Party, fronted by Tony Blair, landing the Labour Party in victory in the 1997 general election in Britain. And Livingstone was able to convince, however he did that, the details are not yet publicly available, but he did successfully convince Tony Blair to create this post of London Mayor. And that was contained in the legislation that also provided for the corrupt and corrupting mayor post and kind of anti-democratic form of governing local councils to be included. So the first election in London for a post of a borough mayor took place 2 years after the election took place for the mayor at the expense of London, which was 2000. And the 2002 was the first year when a mayor in the name of Newham was elected, which was Robin Wales. And all the evidence of all the behavior by the mayor, either Robin Wales or Ken Livingstone or Boris Johnson or Sadiq Khan and the other local borough council mayors, points to the lessening of democracy and democratic accountability. And Sadiq Khan has been, of course, the stooge for many races in the Labour Party. And Sadiq Khan is a stooge, has been a stooge all along. When he was an MP for Tooting in Wandsworth, he was a stooge. And his role in the Labour leadership campaign within the Labour Party for Ed Miliband after the kind of defeat of the Gordon Brown fronted Labour kind of party. It was only Sadiq Khan's role as a stooge that gave him that post of coordinating Ed Miliband's leadership campaign. And he returned, Sadiq Khan got hold of the post as the Labour candidate for mayor at the 2016 London mayor election, so-called, based on his role, especially as the organizer of the leadership campaign for Ed Miliband. There was nothing in that kind of recommendation or list of his abilities to do with fighting for an anti-racist society, anti-racist London, accountable London, or accountable society whatsoever. So what these papers are doing with Andy Barnum, being the kind of voice, the tribune of the people, is reinforcing the myth that the elected mayor equates or equals or matches or is the same as the tribune of the people, as the Times wrongly said. And the Sun, of course, is not running the Andy Barnum picture, because Andy Barnum, despite the fact that he's a right-winger, he's still a Labour Party kind of mayor, if you like. So what they're doing is celebrating Brenda. The Express, the Sun, and the Boris Graf are celebrating Brenda without a mask. And the Daily Mirror is the one that is talking about the Northern Revolt, and it's kind of giving Andy Barnum the closest possible identification with the alleged revolt. As we have said yesterday, and as the facts support, there is no revolt, it's a bureaucratic arrangement. And the actual point is made in the fact, which we shall come to again, that these mayors are demanding more money from the central government. And here, not only is Brenda without a mask, it's Wills in the middle also without a mask. And what they're saying is the headline is one didn't need to wear a mask at all. One, in relation to the monarch, one is supposed to be the kind of third person, singular, that is the preferred kind of word used by Brenda, that is Queen Elizabeth II. And Brenda is the name given to her by Private Eye magazine as part of a timid joke. I mean, Brenda doesn't expose the corruption of the monarchy or the anti-democratic role played by the monarchy. It's a kind of tickling kind of joke, tickling her. And they're putting this one, Boris Johnson is a bozo, and the North gives bozo a custard pie in the marsh. Now, that is bozo. His face is there, and the bozo under the bozo. That's bozo. And the custard pie has been landed on his face. That is the kind of joke paper, the Daily Star. That has been the mode, that has been the kind of way that it has been covering up the evidence of the disastrous pandemonium government. And this is the celebration of the monarch, Brenda without a mask. And it says, without any quotation marks or without any kind of qualification or condition or reservation, masks not necessary as Queen gets back to work. Now, what on earth is that supposed to say or mean? When people are being told to not get back to work and accept the widening of the lockdown, how is that consistent with that policy? How is the description and the parade of the Queen without a mask by the Boris Graf consistent with the policy, which is at the center of the so-called Northern Revolt that the Daily Mirror is talking about. So this is the only picture of France's Macron and Germany's Merkel both of them wearing the mask. So that is a contrast, actually, that signifies more than just the presence of mask and the absence of mask, in the contrast between the Brexiteering Little Englanders who would be celebrating today's picture of Brenda, because Brenda reportedly was a Brexiteer, and that was kind of arranged, it is suspected, by the Brexiteering lobby, and which exaggerated the importance of Brenda's endorsement of the Brexit kind of vote in 2016. Now, what is happening with the substance of the kind of evidence, if you like, of evidence for the basis, as the basis for the latest widening of the lockdown by Johnson, is that there is no evidence reported by any of the papers. There is no evidential kind of line, as we have been saying, as to the contact of the virus up to all the stages, all the stages that the virus must travel and reach the end of it in each infected person. So that's the absence in the Times. The Times is talking about the Russians spreading fake news, and Johnson ready to force Brussels' hand by beefing up no deal talk. Now that is the line, which is a deflection away from the lockdown policy and announcement and expansion that Johnson is doing. Now the I newspaper acknowledges that, as does the Boris Johnson Telegraph or Boris Graph, and as does the Star, despite the fact that it is in the comic mode. And the Daily Mail, of course, is the one that actually sums it up as epidemic of madness. That actually includes every aspect of the incompetence and the pandemonium that Johnson is accused of or can be accused of on the facts. And the Daily Express is supporting Johnson's excuse and taking away the urgency and the heat from Johnson's failures on dealing with the Brexit, dealing with the virus. And the Sun, of course, is celebrating Brenda's not wearing the mask, which shows Rupert Murdoch's agenda, which is that they don't care about the safety of the people, and they don't obviously, clearly, evidently care about the double standards. The Brenda's not wearing the mask and Will's not wearing the mask and coming out and about, and the Fleet Street paper celebrating that sums up the actual madness, because that shows that the papers are not reporting reality, they're reporting fantasy. Brenda not wearing a mask is actually a kind of condemning the people who are kind of following the instructions and abiding by the guidance and guidelines that are issued by the government, most of the people who are doing that. So it's two fingers to all the people, all the citizens, her so-called subjects. So she is showing contempt for the safety of her so-called subjects. And the papers are clueless. They don't actually get that. They don't actually get that fact. And they're not obviously getting that fact in the contents of their hype for Brenda, defying the safety kind of guidance. And this is a message not only spreading to the UK of the Queen, so-called, defying safety guidelines, when Britain is actually kind of tightening guidelines or tightening the restrictions on people's movement and freedom, etc. This is going across the world where these British media and the British kind of news outlets reach via the internet, via the television and other kind of means and modes and media of communication, that the British monarch, who still retains the position of being the monarch of Australia, for example, and Canada and New Zealand, that she is defying the safety and precaution and safety advice. That is not Brenda being responsible, caring, or bothered about the safety of her, quote, her citizens or subjects in Britain or in the rest of the world, where she still has the token kind of position as the queen. As I said, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. And the Guardian is saying about the North, demanding that they should not be treated as the sacrificial lamb. Even that Guardian piece, although it doesn't have the kind of content on the front page in the headlines about Brenda's defiance of the safety guidelines, etc., and Brenda's openly not wearing the mask, it has the de facto, in effect, in the contents, other side, if you like, of the promotion and propaganda by Murdoch's scum and Boris Graf and the Daily Telegraph, the legacy of poisonous lying left by Beaverbrook, a Canadian. Well, Canadian is a complicated kind of one-word description because Canada exists on the corpses of uncounted millions of people of the First Nations, the original nations, as does the United States. But back to the Guardian, they are featuring Andy Barnum, because Guardian, remember, or those who don't know the history, the Guardian as a newspaper was launched from Manchester. And it was called for a very long time the Manchester Guardian, before it dropped the word Manchester and became kind of London-based, although it has an operation in Manchester, but it is known as a London paper now internationally, and also it has got operations in the USA, North America, and in Australia. And it has got the same kind of agenda that the rest of Fleet Street generally operates and runs and is based on, which is to deny most of the evidence and most of the facts and divert the public away from the failings and failures of government, not by just the one that is currently fronted by the Boris Johnson cabal, but also any other government. And especially the Guardian's role has been significant in contributing to the demise of the credibility of John Major fronted conservative government. And that contribution was essentially made by doing some investigative reporting. Very rare, but that was the evidence that investigation and investigative reporting actually enhances the cause of democratic accountability in this country or any country where democracy is lacking, absent, and there is still a so-called media in operation. I mean, the media's first role should be to investigate the shortcomings and the defects and the failures and the lying and the lies of the government in the country, whether the government is legitimately in power or illegitimately in power doesn't kind of make the main difference, because whatever the means of getting to power, any regime, whether fronted by a clown like Boris Johnson or somebody who doesn't come across as so obviously clown or clownish, the main difference is made during the period in office or in power. when the opposition is not effective. Say in the case of Keir Starmer, we have said, his kind of interventions and the prime minister's questions are intimidating. They are completely timid and cowardly and limited. And we have explained that as being connected with his ideology that he actually believes in. Starmer is in the kind of narrative used in the political discourse is that he is a right winger, and the extreme kind of objectors to his position, who include a lot of supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, would call him a conservative. And I would say that he is very similar to Tony Blair's ideology. And he's less expressive so far as compared to Tony Blair, but that is a matter of detail, and that is a matter of time when we can see the extent of his kind of full personality politically. But ideologically, Starmer is a right-winger, and also as a former director of public prosecutions, that is a highest post in the UK of a prosecutor. He is a member of the government. He is a former member of the government, although he was not a member of the government officially, but that is a government post. Director of Public Prosecution is a government post, and by definition, Starmer carries the kind of baggage of having been a government kind of official. So Starmer is not holding Boris Johnson anywhere near comparably in relation to or in comparison with where that Ed Miliband demonstrated a few weeks ago. So, and the papers are not pointing this out. As I said yesterday, the Guardian's sketch writer, John Crace, is kind of making a sort of effort to bring to attention the various failings of the Johnson administration. But Crace being employed in the Guardian, where the editor is right-winger, Keith Weiner, despite her protestations or pretensions, this paper is not really doing the job of investigating the evidence of wrongdoing and negligence and failure and incompetence and unfitness and dysfunctionality evident in the behavior of Boris Johnson and his cabal of occupants. All of them are Brexiteers and serial liars against the people and to the people and in the name of the people. So this is the Guardian, however, going back to its Manchester kind of origins and devoting the whole page today, front page today, to an opposition statement or oppositionist stance to Johnson's lockdown plans, and they are focusing on the role being played in the opposition stance by the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Barnum. So that's the Guardian doing a very kind of hefty, neat job of reviving its Manchester kind of connection and pleasing a lot of people in Manchester, because the Guardian is the only one that is doing that kind of spread with Andy Barnum, although Barnum is being featured in other papers as well, but not in the way even the Daily Mirror, Northern Revolt, is giving Barnum the space, front page space. But the Guardian has got more extensive kind of contents and copy on the front page, favoring the role that Barnum is playing. And Barnum appeared on television as a spokesman or the least or definitive spokesperson for the other Metro mayors that the Times had anticipated in its editorial on the day just hours before the metro mayors launched their first press conference against the plan to widen the lockdown across the north. Now, what the Guardian is missing and failing to do is to rigorously examine the evidence of failures by Johnson. And that is, as I said, down to the fact that the Guardian is still a right-wing outlet and it is still opposed to the Labour Party replacing the Conservatives, because the Guardian betrayed the Labour kind of leadership as fronted and personified by Jeremy Corbyn, and the Guardian actually imitated, like the Private Eye did, despite contrary pretensions of being critical of the rest of the Fleet Street titles. The Guardian undermined Jeremy Corbyn, and the tactics used by the Guardian were tactics that were used by other organs in Fleet Street on other kind of themes. All of those resembling the overall overarching world view against Muslims. So that is a complex kind of comparison, but that is easily verifiable, because what we are saying is actually fact-based, evidence-based, and continuously identifiable and traceable on the facts that the Guardian opposed Jeremy Corbyn as part of the Guardian's own agenda of hostility towards Muslims. The Guardian is less hostile to people of other religions coming from, or mainly from, the two continents of Africa and Asia in the context of Little Englander kind of agenda. The Guardian has failed to hold the government of the Conservatives to account. Now, saying earlier that where the opposition is dead or inactive politically, or kind of not effective politically, or cannot make the traction in its so-called opposition, or its opposition that it should deliver on the basis of the facts and evidence and the needs of the people and needs of democracy, that failure or that gap or that kind of hole left by a non-active or non-effective opposition can only be filled for democracy, for the people, by a rigorous and kind of fact-based and loudly pro-democratic, evidence-based, fact-based, pro-democratic press. So in this country, there is no pro-democratic press at all. What they're doing today there are two sections of the press today in the coverage of the North. One section is represented by, of course, the Daily Mirror and the Guardian, both of which have pretensions that they still are kind of still favor an opposition to the Conservatives. They're not directly representative of the Labour Party, but they both have pretensions commercially that they are kind of neutral, or they're not as brazenly supportive of the lying agenda and narrative that the scum owned by Rupert Darty, Digger, Murdoch, or the Beaverbrook legacy in the Daily Express, the poisonous Daily Suppressor, and the Star, which is part of the Daily Suppression, but it is kind of running on a jokey mode over the Brexit disaster for the last few months. So that is the Guardian and the Daily Mirror one side, and the rest of the papers on the other side. And they are failing to register the day-to-day failings, evidence-based, fact-based failings, lying, contradiction, and the narrative is being completely messed up by the fact that they are not giving the evidence of the abuse of billions of pounds. That abused money is going to the pockets of conservatives, right-wingers, and big business. And that is something connected with the fact that Boris Johnson himself is a sponsoree or sponsored agent of big business, as represented by the millions that he has been paid over the last 12 years. No, over the last, let's say 10 years since he began to be featuring as the candidate for the mayor in the name of London. So the Daily Borisgraph has paid him millions of pounds under pretext that he is writing or he has written columns. He has not written a single column that has been independent, objective, and it hasn't made any significant difference whatsoever to the sum total of the knowledge about politics or society or the evidence underlying various policies of any government. So the Borisgraph is hiding, and hiding as part of the same agenda, hiding the failures of Boris Johnson. And Murdoch's scum doesn't want Boris Johnson to be replaced or the right-wing conservatives to be replaced or ousted from power, because the agenda that the right-wing conservative regime serves, whether it's a lunatic-faced Boris Johnson frontage or whether it's less obviously lunatic, it doesn't matter, because the substance of the delivery is in keeping with allowing Rupert Murdoch the operation that he has been allowed for decades. Boris Johnson is not the only one, because all the conservative leaders, including one leader in waiting that Murdoch wants to use as his instrument, in case Boris Johnson falls under the proverbial bus and the Conservatives need a new leader. That is Michael Gove. But we shall discuss Michael Gove in detail in due course another time, but except to say here that whatever the detail, the Conservative regime will be supported by most of Fleet Street, and the Fleet Street will be turning a blind eye to all the failures and failings of the Conservatives. And whatever tactics they use, the Sun uses the Queen, and the Daily Suppress uses the alternative that the millions of 26 million patients have missed GP appointments. Whatever the detail, essentially they are kind of trying to shore up the sinking kind of credibility of Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson is dysfunctional and dysfunctioning and is all over the place. And despite all of this, the opposition is not anywhere near catching him out. So the mayor of Greater Manchester is being promoted by The Guardian as the voice of the reason and voice of opposition and voice of demand that the Labour kind of dominated. Still, Labour Party still is the biggest party electorally in the north. It has lost a lot of votes on the 12th of December 2019 because of the double whammy. One, that Corbyn failed to articulate the advocacy of opposition to the Little Englander Brexiteering kind of thing, narrative that the right-wing conservatives were running. And also due to Boris Johnson being advised by his current, or at that time, current advisor to lie to the northern voters and promise all kinds of goodies. And that is what the gullibles in the majority of those who actually voted for Boris Johnson on the basis of that lie or that pack of lies, they swallowed it, they bought it, and they were convinced that Boris Johnson was going to deliver. Now that pack of lies is now truly home, and it is now exposed as having been a lie all along. And Andy Barnum is exploiting that for his own personal credibility as the mayor at the expense of Greater Manchester, as are the other mayors. So therefore, because none of the metro mayors is really held to account by the local kind of constituencies. None of the metro mayors, not the local mayors in Tower Hamlets or in Lewisham or in Hackney or in Newham. The whole idea behind mayor system is that it's a corrupt post, and the post holder can be as corrupt as they like, and they won't be prosecuted or held to account, as has happened in the case of Lutfur Rahman being given no kind of action, if you like, to hold him accountable to the public, to the electors, to the community for the serial corruption and criminality and abuse that went on by him and under his kind of incumbency as the mayor until he was removed by the election commission on the 23rd of April 2015. So the mayor of Greater Manchester is being kind of treated as a legitimate kind of post holder and mayor post, the legitimate post, speaking in the name of the people in the area. Now, this is the Northern Revolt, and Barnum is featured in both the Daily Mirror and the Guardian front pages. In the details of the contents of the papers, there is no recognition of the need to account for the money, but they're saying that both papers are saying that the northern areas affected by the wider restrictions announced by Johnson and which is due to be implemented today and starting from today, that this cannot be implemented unless there is more money, enough money, adequate money from Boris Johnson controlled or fronted central government to these areas, to these metropolitan areas and their constituent kind of local boroughs. Now, whatever the reason, the fact is that that is where they stop talking about democracy. So the papers need to spell out the disaster that is happening in each borough under a mayor system or not, and the disaster that is being presided over by and personified by Boris Johnson in the case of the failure to deal with the virus. And in a country where the opposition is absent, the only way that the people, the public, that the voters, the electorate can find out what is happening to their country and why they are not being given the service that they deserve in a free and democratically so-called, operated country, is by the telling of the truth by the free press and the media, any country, anywhere. And the evidence is that most countries, so-called democracies, let's start with India. The Western papers kind of influence, Western media influenced by the narrative manufactured in Britain by the British imperialists, still misdescribe India as the world's largest, biggest democracy. Why is it a lie? Because hundreds of millions of people in India are disenfranchised by the successive, that is chronologically successive, that is one after the other, government or central government in India that has come into place since the late 1940s up to now. Currently, the one that is in post or in power is the extreme right-wing, Brahminist, Hindu nationalist, racist, anti-Muslim, and anti the kind of lower class, so-called the lower castes, BJP. But even before the BJP was in place, and most of the times the central government was held by a variety versions of the Congress party that the British kind of endorse and they identify with the Nehru family, which they falsely misdescribe as the Nehru-Gandhi family. They misconnect the name Gandhi in order to benefit the Nehru family from association with MK Gandhi, which they are not. They were not associated as relatives or as family with M.K. Gandhi, who came from Gujarat, and the Nehru family come from Kashmir. But the British mainstream, imperialist kind of mainstream media, which all the Guardian and others are included in that kind of mythology, they have been calling India the world's largest democracy, and India is not. As I have said, hundreds of millions of Indians are disenfranchised from any benefit of exercising the democratic rights of votes and voting and all the rest of it. So Indian papers have no excuse. The Indian papers, the counterparts of Fleet Street printed papers, have no excuse to not publish the details of the disenfranchisement that has been going on for decades. And they don't. And the same case with other countries, neighboring countries, in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, there is no rigorous media publishing the facts, not even 10% of the facts of what is going on. As a result of which, all these three countries now, nearly 2 billion people, I mean, not 2 billion, 1.5 billion people, more than 17 kind of 100 million people are being ill-served by lack of democratic press, truthful press and papers. And we come back to Britain, and that is what is happening here. Despite the fact that there is a rebellion, northern revolt, there is no revolt actually happening. And there won't be any revolt happening in the north, because most of the coverage, even by the Daily Mirror, is not about the facts of the failures and lack of accountability. And unless there is accountability, and unless there is actual evidence of how unaccountable the various parts of the government is in detail, there won't be any revolt. And as I had this encounter at what is now the college, University of Law, with a constitutional law tutor. I mean, this idiot said that Britain hadn't had a revolution, turmoil, like many of the countries in Europe or elsewhere in the world. So therefore, the British Constitution was safe and secure, and all the other garbage. The point is that the British press and the British academies and the British kind of institutions like the judiciary are all corrupt and collusive. And all of them are based on the denials and the lies about the truth, about the character and the kind of legacy and the records of the forces in power in this country. And that is the real reason why the press is allowed to lie and is able to lie, and the MPs are complete kind of stooges. The MPs are not tribunes of the people. The Times said the mayors are the tribunes of the people. That was a lie. And the lie also extends to the description of the elected members of parliament in the House. Look at the contents. Look at the texts of what they say. Look at the records on Hansard of what they actually say. They're very timid and very ignorant and very kind of morally compromised and challenged. And they are, most of them, intellectually challenged as well. And in terms of knowledge and awareness, they are very challenged and limited indeed. So the media, again, is the only outlet or only kind of platform that has the opportunity to record these, to chronicle these. They call themselves chronicle. Still, there are very many local papers and outlets called chronicle. That is a word supposed to be recording the events and goings on, but they're not chronicling the facts. They're not, and some others are the reporter and the Time and all the other things. And they're kind of defying those descriptions and those levels. And Time now, as exposed by the failures of the virus, is to get it all together democratically and start telling the truth about the completely repulsively irrelevant and insulting and corrupt serial crooks holding positions of power in Britain, and to deliver democracy to the people in whose name these crooks operate and do their corrupt business from their corruptly acquired posts and positions. So what we shall be doing is putting the rest of the commentary on the Fleet Street and contextually bringing up to date the commentary in part 2. This is just before 0808 hours GMT in the morning of Friday, the 16th of October 2020.